Hey guys, welcome to an episode of the Sales Manager Academy podcast. As always, I'm your host Omar, and we talk about leadership in the small retail space, right? The small retail world. We're talking about wireless retail, we're talking about appliances, we're talking about AV, we're talking about furniture, we're talking about everything outside of big box retail, where we actually have to know what the fuck we're doing in order to be able to get those not only massive deals that are going to come in, right? Because they don't just come in, we help uncover them, but also realistically to build our book of business and have those clients, those customers come back in. And as a leader, my goal is always to make sure that my people are taking care of their clients and taking care of themselves. Because when they get paid, I know I will get paid. And that's the mindset shift that we need to have in order to help our teams really prosper, to really get to that level where they're actually performing. And it takes time. And one of the things I want to talk about today, especially if you have multiple locations that you're working with, right? You're a regional, you're a territory, you're a area manager, you're a district manager, okay? When you're in one of those titles and all you're focusing in on is you're sending the exact same message to every single location that, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And you're not even looking at any other metrics. You're not looking at their close rates. You're not looking at their actual KPIs. You're not looking at anything. You're just blindly sending out those messages. Your team will lose respect for you because they understand those sales leaders that are not brand new, that are tenured and actually look and care about what they're doing. They're looking at their metrics and they're like, I don't know why the fuck you're sending me this. Have you looked at my metrics? Like, have you seen what I'm producing? But yet I'm getting the same message as the store that is completely underperforming in not only one, but maybe multiple metrics, right? They're not even hitting goal, they're not hitting quota. That's what you need to understand. That as leaders, they see that. So you really need to step up your game. You can get away with that with brand new leaders that don't know what the fuck they're doing because they don't understand yet. But when you're talking about tenured leaders, it doesn't matter if they're barely coming into your organization or if they've been in the organization for a while. They understand the difference between the leadership styles and they understand when you don't know what you don't know. Okay? And when you try to fluff and be like, hey, I know what I'm doing because now I have this title, that doesn't mean shit to anybody. But as a leader, you need to really focus in and hone in on those locations that aren't performing more than locations that are. You can lean on the locations that are performing and be like, hey, what can we do? What's working for you? What can you share? Right? But the thing is that you cannot tell the other ones what they need to do directly because then you take away the ownership just like you did from those sellers. You have to get them to be the ones to realize what needs to be fixed. But you can't give them, you know, 20 different things to fix at once. They need one cornerstone focus, one item that's really going to push them ahead. Because you have to think about it that way. What's the most important metric and what is the cascading effects to the other metrics if we focus on this one thing? As a leader, I've told you guys this. I continuously will say, I will die on this hill. Take it and use it. My focus is always, I want you to make the most amount of money possible. Doesn't matter if I was a district, doesn't matter if I was a territory, didn't matter if I was a director or a store manager. That is always what I told my teams of sellers. Because when they understand that my goal is to make sure they're making the most amount possible with the least amount of friction, right? Working less. When you frame it in that sense, it makes them think about, okay, what does he have? What can he bring? What is he trying to do? Because that makes complete sense to me. Like, he's trying to make me make more money, but he also wants me to work less. And he wants me to make more money because I'm truthful about it, right? I'm selfish, and I'll tell him. Because when you're making money, that means I'm making money. So my focus isn't on me making money. My focus is on you making the money. Because then I don't have to worry about what I'm making because I know you're taken care of. You see that shift, okay? Because I would rather spend time developing my people and making sure they're going to be there for a very long time instead of every 30, 60, 90 days me having to run around and have to hire a bunch of brand new people. I would rather avoid that and spend the time really developing my people, because I know that person that is 18 months in, 2 years into that role is far better equipped than the person that's 2 months, 3 months in. There's a lot less I need to do with that tenured person than I do with that newer person. And when I take days off, I can take days off. I know performance is going to be there. I don't have to constantly check in on what are you doing, what do you got going on. I can actually disconnect. And you guys don't understand the beauty of being able to disconnect as a leader and not have performance be hindered. That is when you know you have something great on your hands. And it's even better when it's consistent. Because anybody can have an off day where everything is amazing and it just happens to be I was off. But what happens when the performance is down? That is the most important aspect that you're looking at. Because remember, guys, your teams will not rise to the occasion. They're going to fall back to their level of training. So tough times, tough markets are where you see what your teams are actually made out of. And you can choose. I want to see what they're made of on their own, because when you do that and they flounder, that's on you. Or, you know what, times are good right now, but we can still get better, and we're going to continuously be training, and we're going to be focusing on it. Just like athletes at, top performance organizations do, right? You're talking about your professional athletes, you're talking about your favorite sports teams. Just like they still train on their off time for game day, we're focusing in to make sure that we're on point, okay? Because when times get tough, my teams will still be able to rise to the occasion. That's what it means to rise to the occasion. You're falling back to the level of training. That's super important. And that goes back to focusing in on the locations that are performing versus the locations that aren't performing. Me, if my stores are performing, great. I might stop in once or twice a month, check in, right? Make sure everything is good. What do you guys need? I got you. But I'm going to spend the rest of my time focused in on those locations that really do need support, that do need help, that aren't closing at that close rate that I know is the expectation. That's where I'm going to be spending my time at. Because if the goal is, say, 10% close rate, okay, why am I spending my time at a store that's closing at 15, 20% when I have another location that is closing at 3 to 5%? Why am I spending the exact same amount of time at both locations? They're good. The ones closing at that 15, 20% don't need as much support. I need to focus in over here because maybe the teams need better training. Maybe I'm understaffed. Maybe I have the wrong people at that location. Maybe I need people that speak a completely different language at there and I only have English speakers. Or maybe they only speak Mandarin, or the majority of the customers coming in speak Mandarin, but I got too many Spanish speakers there. Okay? That's what you need to focus in on and ensure that you have the right things. But you have to spend time at those locations to truly understand that. And once you start fixing those small little things, because typically it's going to be a small tweak that gets adjusted, and then you're going to see those close rates actually improve. But you're not going to know that by looking at the numbers. Because the only thing I'll be able to tell you by looking at the numbers is that, yes, I got a problem. You guys need to close more. Focus on closing more. But what I don't see is that other story of it, right? The other part of the story. I have bilingual people there, but I have the wrong bilinguals there. Or they're closing, but they're missing so much more because they don't understand what we actually can offer, because they're not spending time training and developing, because my store manager that I have there hasn't been trained on how to develop other people. Or they don't have time to focus in on that because they're constantly busy. So even though they have high foot traffic, we're leaving so much on the table because they don't have time to go over those small details because of how constantly busy they are. Okay? That's what you have to look at. That is very, very important to understand because you could be surprised at how that tiny shift, that small little focus is going to make that bigger change for you guys. I've talked about the locations I've developed and taken over that have gone from doing 250, 300 opportunities to doing well over 700, to turning regular stores into what are known as battleships and flagships, right? That they're trending to do really well, that they're a cornerstone, they're one of the best producing locations in the entire organization. They're part of the top 20% plus, right? Top 10% plus. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about those small shifts. It's not having to, oh, I need to replace the entire staff. I need to come in and make all these drastic changes without understanding the makeup and what's actually going on. When you take over a territory, you're inheriting the troubles that come with it, but you need to understand how to adjust that. You can't just come in and be like, okay, well, you know, it's this other organization's problem, or I inherited this team and now I'm 6 months in, but that's the problem from the previous guy that had it, or the previous person was in this role, right? That's their issue. It was an issue for them, and I'm supposed to, no. You got a small window to make that adjustment. You don't have to turn everything around right away. You have to make one adjustment though that's going to make an impact, and that impact is going to help lift numbers. Okay. And as I mentioned before, training, developing your people goes a long way in that performance. Because when you don't focus on that and you expect them to just do it on their own when they've had no guidance, no mentorship, no leadership, what are they going to do? They're going to flounder. And then there you are having to find somebody else to replace. The lost opportunity. Your focus has now been derailed because this now becomes top priority, especially when you need to replace a leader. And I've seen plenty of organizations that are constantly talking about we love to promote from within. We love to promote from within. And they have all these leadership positions open, and they're constantly trying to bring people from the outside in to fill those roles. So you have to really walk the line you're towing. Okay, exemplify that. And you do that by training and developing your people. And that's how you're going to be able to really get that performance. And if you don't focus on that, that's when you're going to be floundering. That's when you're going to have a bunch of excuses. That's when things go wrong, terribly wrong, especially if you're an owner operator, or if you're essentially a VP of a territory, okay, where you're essentially the acting president of that area. You need to focus on the training and developing. You can't shortcut that, but you can make it be easier to adapt to and easier to pick up. Micro chunking coaching sessions, training sessions is so much better and leads to far better success than data dumping a bunch of fucking information in a very short window and expecting everybody to retain that information, especially when they don't get the practice. Okay? That's the reason why the information doesn't get retained, because it is so much information without anything to support, to back any of that information up. They can't get that instant feedback loop. But when you do small micro chunking sessions, you can learn right away about the material you just went over, because now it's fresh, it's instant. You're like, wow, okay, now I understand it. Okay? Just like Goku said in Super Saga. Now I understand it. It's as simple as that, guys. But you have to spend time actually being intentional about it. Because when you're intentional about the material, when you're intentional about the actions, it makes your teams truly understand what's going on and be able to take that back, use it, and succeed with it. And that's how you turn locations that are underperforming into locations that are actually performing very well. And then once everything is fixed and you can focus in on the small grain information, on those small little details, you're going to see them start to skyrocket. And you're going to have people that are going to be staying with you for a much longer time. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave it there for today. Be sure to hit that like, follow button, subscribe. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for stepping in to another episode of the Sales Manager Academy podcast. As always, I'm your host, Omar.